So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to Dusk over Mythlond, and this is obviously the Greyhaven siege that I've been promising for about a week now, and I finally got around to being able to do it. So this is going to be rather interesting, mainly because I do note in the top corner here that it is 31,000 frames, which is fairly sizable, but usually you would expect, particularly one of WK's maps, which tend to be rather huge and sprawling, to last into the 40,000 frames. So I would assume that things are going to get underway very, very quickly. Speaking of which, we'll go around the attackers first of all, because it will be easier to sort of differentiate their armies, whereas the defenders, I assume, are all mixed together. Actually, this might be one of the few times where I want to turn the brightness up just a little bit. And first of all, we will have Ragnar, who is playing as Isengard. He's got some Uruk-hai Berserkers, which, depending on who they're facing within the settlement, their AP could be very useful, and obviously multiple HP as well. We've also got a black powder cart hidden in here, which is... it's the sort of thing which can bring down a wall instantly, provided it gets into position. You don't get to see the black powder cart an awful lot, because it can be a little bit awkward to use, and of course it will be focused down by any archers that are up on the walls. We'll see if it's able to bring forth some destruction in this fight. We've got some Uruk-hai infantry with the armour upgrade. We've got some Uruk-hai raiders who do not have the armour upgrade. Very much the standard cannon fodder-esque units that you can send in as Isengard. Obviously the Dunlending clansmen are even cheaper, so you can dispose of them even more readily. But sometimes you do need a little bit more in terms of your infantry. The Dunlending clansmen will probably not be able to do a huge amount of damage to whoever the defenders are, unless it's cavalry. Dunlending clansmen have got a heightened anti-cavalry bonus. Isengard in general are very, very good at dealing with cavalry, so that's bad news for Rohan. We've got some Uruk-hai archers and some Uruk-hai crossbows, so a good mix there of the two ranged units. Obviously the crossbows in particular could be very, very useful as the fight enters its final phases. The Naz-kai, which is the general, I believe. You can see him over here, maybe? The Isengard general is always a bit of an annoying one, because it blends in very well with all of the champions of the White Hand and the Naz-kai. We've got some Trolls of the White Hand. A new model for them is going to be forthcoming with the next patch, I believe. But for the time being, they've still got their rather dopey-looking expressions over here, and their enormous World of Warcraft-style shoulder pauldrons, but that will be changing. Crimson Beheli, I believe, is in charge of the Trolls. More Uruk-hai infantry with the armour upgrade. We've got some more Raiders without it, so he's definitely invested more in his better infantry, which might be a good idea here. And then the Raiders are just going to be sent in as a sacrificial lamb, and obviously the Dunlending clans are pushing forward the Rams. Looks like the attackers are actually going to go for every gate they possibly can, which will obviously mean the outer defence will either crumble very quickly, or the defenders will have to try and hold them indefinitely. One of those two things will happen based on the time that this battle takes, and then we've got some Warg Riders as well. So, the first of the middle armies, we have Simply Simple, who is playing as Umbar. Umbar in general can be pretty good, defensively or offensively in a siege, purely because of their overall survivability. It's a little bit dark here, but we can see that the Abrazani Nadu Tariq do indeed have their armour upgrade, so they are AP, and they will of course last decently in melee, provided they are not up against other armour-piercing units. Another unit of Nadu Tariq with the same thing. Narun Aru Royal Guard, which is not the General's Bodyguard actually, so just some Spear Archer hybrids, multiple HP of course. Some Nadu Barweeb with the armour upgrade. No, not with the armour upgrade, rather, just the standard variant. But even so, they're still one of the tankiest archers in the game, at least if you don't go into the multiple HP ones, because of course the Narun Aru Royal Guard would be able to throw their hat into that ring anyway. Some Numenorian Shield Guard, we've got some Castamir's Legion here, a couple more units of them at the back, so an elite Umbar army. A Catapult over here, some Narduzagar as well, who also have the armour upgrade, and then the General is going to be riding with his Warlords of Umbar once more. So a smaller army, more elite, but this could potentially work in his favour, provided he isn't in a situation where he's just getting shot to bits from range. Because even Umbar would struggle if they are getting focused down to a certain extent. We got Mia Eel, who is the one who sent me the replay, so big thank you to him. This was about a month ago now, or even over a month ago even. So I'm glad that I was finally able to get around to doing it, but unfortunately I had two Greyhaven Siege that were essentially given to me on the same day, and I just picked one at random, but finally getting around to this one now. Eastron Clansman, obviously he's playing as Rune. We've got some Variag Mercenaries and some Loka Narim, so he's got good archer force here, and they're already firing, so honestly, based on the number of red arrows on this radar that you can, well, the minimap I should say, The runes shouldn't have too many issues actually smashing through the defences. We'll see in a moment though. We've got some Scion Rim, obviously very survivable spears. Eastron Clansmen with the first tier of armour upgrade, so they haven't gone all the way, and then some units of Eastron Clansmen without it. He's got some Scion Rim back here as well as the contingent of Flag Rim, so 3 units of them, AP, very useful. Gamp Rim, very similar story, Halberds with AP. A couple of units of Connell's Shadow Guards, and Valtroth Sapphire Bladesmen, which a lot of people, if given the choice, will tend to bring the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen because of the flair that they bring. But the Sapphire Bladesmen are one of the strongest javelin units in the game, and they are definitely no slouches in melee either. And perhaps they're a little bit less risky than the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, because the Dragon's Wrath crossbows tend to need a perfect shot, whereas the Baltroth Sapphire Bladesmen will function in the same way as other javelins, only with a little bit more lethality. There's some Eastron crossbowmen over here, 2 units of them, and then finally the general is going to be with his Connell's Chosen, so a strong infantry unit there. And then finally in the north we have Mordor, played by Master Blaster, and he is going to be trying to tackle 2 gates as well, just like Isengard is in the south. So both of the Orc factions with their numbers are going to try and spread themselves out. We'll see if the Evil Men factions can take advantage of that in the middle. We've got some Morannon Guard. Obviously Morannon Guard are certainly not the last word in terms of quality, but they are cheap and they are spears, so potentially it will make it difficult for the enemy to counter-attack out of the gates with any cavalry. Got some Orc Javelins, obviously cheap armour-piercing missiles. Minas Morgul Chosen, obviously much better in terms of spears, very difficult to kill quickly. More Morannon Guard, more Orc fodder. Minas Morgul Chosen again, so some more holding power, and some more Morannon Guard. It looks as though this gate over here is just going to be a token force sent over here. Minas Morgul Chosen will hold, but they won't necessarily crack through the defences that quickly. We've got some more Morannon Guard, then over here we can start to see some of the nastier stuff. We've got some Olag Kai, and then this is a rather interesting gambit over here by Master Blaster. He's brought 2 units of Nazgul, one of which is the General, the one with 10 in it. So yeah, instead of the 9, it's now the 19. So that's bad news for Middle-earth, I think, but potentially risky. There aren't many of them. If they get focused down, it could be nasty for Mordor, but if they don't get focused down, this could be exactly the sort of thing which wreaks havoc in the defensive lines, because it'll be difficult to deal with from a pure melee standpoint. Some more Orc Javelins, some Orc Maulers as well, which obviously not exactly the last word in terms of quality, but still cheap AP units can be very, very useful. A lot of AP in general from the attackers. Orc Maulers. Some Black Legion, obviously people are big fans of the Great Shield units which can push through defences, I've noticed from the comments. That was sarcasm, of course. We've got some Orc Fodder, and then I think another unit of Orc Fodder. So he's gone very much for the split, as Mordor often can do, between his very low tier troops and then his higher tier troops. But it's obvious that over here is where he's going to be trying to push with his Black Legion, so let's have a look at the defenders before getting on with it. The Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, played by Sartus. And the AP is obviously going to pay dividends against Khazad-dûm from all of the attacking factions. He's got some 3rd Legion on the walls. It's still going to be difficult to break down units like the 3rd Legion and the sentries, obviously, from the front, but obviously additional AP is going to be very helpful there. But again, a bit of a skeleton crew in places from the defenders. That is an odd light glitch there, but it can't be helped. Got some Sons of the Fallen backed up by some Hammers of Gundabad, a good mix there, a very survivable spearmen, and then obviously the AP Hammers from Gundabad, some Meteor Guard, so more AP, very, very strong of course, and then the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers. Not a huge force over here, but strong individual units indeed. We'll see if they can hold though. Meanwhile, up here on the hill, taking up a very nice position, we've got the Orc Hunters, again, Khazad-dûm. They've got a nice shot down onto the Mordor army as they advance. I've seen WK, the first time I played on this map, I think it was WK or someone put a catapult up here, and it was a nightmare for me to advance up through the area. But archers will do nice damage as well, so we've got some warriors of Khazad-dûm, we've got more warriors in addition to some sentries, and then some 3rd Legion as well. So decent force this. I mean, only the Minas Morgul Chosen over here are really what you would call an elite unit, and the dwarves should be able to hold spearmen at bay for some time. Meanwhile over here we can see Juicy Pipeweed is playing as Harad, and he's going to be facing down Rune over here. He's got some Southron Warband as well as some Southron Pikemen, some Muhard Beast Hunters over here with the Javelins of course, but the centre of this defence is going to be the Serpent Guard, the Dismounted Serpent Guard I should say, with the armour upgrade, so they're essentially dismounted Black Serpent Guard in terms of unit model. Good units, but I would still think they would struggle against that amount of runic forces if they all attack at once. The Flag Rim's AP should give them a nice leg up against the Serpent Guard, although the AP polearms that Harad have deployed here could hold Rune in place for longer than maybe Rune would like, but definitely a very skeleton crew defence down there. Meanwhile, down over here we can see more Haradrim from Juicy Pipeweed. We've got more Southron's Pikemen and Warband and Trollmen. Now the Trollmen, of course, very, very strong units. Definitely the heart of most Harad infantry forces because of their multiple HP nature and their ability to inflict quite a lot of damage, shall we say, for a shielded unit. Haradrim archers up on the wall, as well as some Southron archers. They need to be careful though, because Umbar have brought a catapult, so they should probably get down from there with all possible dispatch. And we've got some beast hunters over here as well. Looks like Harad are taking this gate over here as well, but with the support of Linden. Now, interestingly enough, all of the AP the attackers have brought will only really be universally useful against the dwarves. Both Harad and Linden not exactly focused around their armour, so we'll see how this goes. Muhard Berserkers, of course, shock troops, some more dismounted Serpent Guard. We've got some Hashari Stalkers in there as well, some Rangers, some Champions of Nafarat, the Demons of the Desert, Noldorin Horsehorse, my word, this is a strong defence over here, Southron Warband, and some Southron Archers. So Isengard, half of the Isengard army is absolutely not going to want to advance into all of that mess. Meanwhile, back here we'll start to get into some of Linden's forces, which are played by Declan Gardiner, before I forget to mention him. We've got some Mithlond pikemen, we've got some Four Linden pikemen, we've got some Mithlond marines. Obviously the Javelin pike combination from Linden, very well known. Four Linden archers up here, and then over on this cliff over here we've got some Four Linden pikemen and some Harlinden guard. Obviously Harlinden guard spear archer hybrids. Linden's hybrids give them a lot of power. Harlinden infantry on both walls, very, very strong. Isengard will struggle to beat them, and with enough Uruk-hai infantry, particularly with the upgrade, they should manage it, but it's not going to be an easy fight. Four Linden pikemen over here as well. Mithlond pikemen, a lot of pikes from Linden. They do need to be careful that they, the temptation will be to try and push through Linden's defences with pure mass. A Dwarven catapult, obviously with their multi-shot. Some Harlinden guard again, and then back here I would assume we've got some elite Linden foot troops, and indeed we do. 2 units of Noldorin guard, which are not multiple HP, but they are obviously fantastically skillful, as well as being very heavily armoured. The sort of unit that would not look out of place in Ladris' roster. So, without further ado, let's begin. So obviously, with how long this battle is, it's no surprise to me that the attackers are getting right down to brass tacks and going to attack straight away, presumably from all angles. The one area where they might not would be potentially over here with Umbar, because they simply don't have the same level of numbers that all of their allies do. But that's fine, because over here is where they can take full advantage of their catapult. And indeed they do. They take out a huge portion of those Haradrim archers. I'm actually very surprised that the defenders decided to bank up their archers on one of the attacking armies that has a catapult. They would have been better off doing that somewhere else. Meanwhile, here comes the patented lag on a big siege, I should say. I've never done a stream before. But there goes one of the walls. Umbar bringing that down. Obviously, Isengard, they don't really care about their Dunlending clansmen, so they can send them up without too much fear of reprisal and bring down the gates at their own leisure. Meanwhile, over here I think is going to be one of the most interesting initial engagements here between Mordor and Khazad-dûm, because Khazad-dûm have had to spread themselves fairly thinly up here. Harad's numbers have sort of offset Linden's weakness in that area a little bit, whereas Khazad-dûm have no such luck, and unfortunately for them, Mordor do have the tools to make life a little bit uncomfortable for them. We shall see though. It really does depend on how Master Blast uses his Black Legion. I think if he uses them, causes some chaos in the Mordor lines. Interestingly enough, he's actually sent his Nazgul and his Olag-kai over here, so this might be where he's focusing instead, which is where the Dwarven forces are a little bit more thin on the ground, but even over here they do have some guards of Khazad-dûm, which I missed, and then a combination of Sons of the Fallen and Hams of Gundabad, so definitely no easy way in, but we'll see. There goes another wall. The offensive catapult's doing a good job of bombarding the city, although admittedly, even with the walls down, Mithlond itself is still pretty defensible because the areas which you can bombard are so small. We shall see. Umbar indeed are the only attacking army which have so far remained static. What on earth is going on there? This is some sort of black magic. Well, they're getting up onto the wall with this dark sorcery. How very strange. I've never noticed that before, but I assume it has been present. Well, there we go. An auspicious start to the battle. But now Rune have the ability to charge on in if they so desire. And indeed they are, by the looks of things. Nope, they're not. They're turning back around. Instead, they're going to get their Variag mercenaries to try and shoot it through the gap, which is of course wise. Southron pikemen, can do very little to defend themselves, but Harad have sent over some trollmen, so you know they do mean to put up a defence over on this outer wall, and that means as a result, I would imagine that the defenders will be defending from the front for the most part. The black powder cart is here. We will be able to see it, and it is firing its missiles. Ooh, this is going to be really nasty. I don't think Declan has noticed this, because this is going to wipe out the vast bulk of this unit of Harland and infantry. In fact, all of it destroyed, and that wall is gone. No, not all of it is destroyed. Only 36 of them remaining, however, so good use of the black powder cart there. It's not something you see very often. In fact, those Dunlendon clansmen abandoned the ram so that they weren't caught in their own explosion, and now they're going to go back to the ram and try and bring down the gate, so good use of the black powder cart there. It's been in the game for a little while at this point, but you don't get to see it too often because it is risky to bring something like that and have it effectively used, but this time it was deployed well. And Ragnar continuing to push forward on this side as well. Interesting to see if the defenders, they are obviously outnumbered, but it'd be interesting to see how they deal with this. Umbar's catapult slamming into the cliffside. What are they actually going for? It's hard to tell, there's nothing really over here. Maybe Serpent Guard? But obviously Umbar very content to try and trade arrows with the defending forces. Southron Archers obviously going to be no match in a skirmish fight for Nardu Bawib, although admittedly the Nardu Bawib don't have the best shot in there, so we'll see. Now the ram is moving forward, and the Nardu Tariq will get ready to move into the breach. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening. Let's go and see what's happening up here, not having up here. Got some hammers of Gundabad. Obviously the Orc fodder not going to really make much of a dent in these Khazad-dûm units. And indeed, the ladders may be set up, but Mordor over here are just waiting for the time being, I think, for other attacks to get fully underway. We'll see. Some more Orc hunters heading up here onto the hillside. A lot of these arrows are hitting the floor, but they are also getting some nice shots into the very clustered Mordor ranks. And there goes another gate. And indeed, that is this one that we just saw here. The Morannon Guard and the Minas Morgul Chosen are here. Let's actually just turn things down a little bit. Isengard also bringing down the gate over in the south. Another gate goes down from Isengard. There we go. So this is good synergy here from the attackers. All points being attacked at once. That they want to attack anyway. We've got some Orc Maulers up on the wall, which actually not doing too badly. It says victory seems certain, but that will change, I would imagine. Actually, no it won't, because the Nazgul are here. I take it back. I mean, Master Blast is using his general unit very aggressively. I would have used the other unit of Nazgul personally, unless he is. Let's see, is he? No. So he's using his general up here on the walls, which is definitely giving them pause, and the Orc Maulers with their AP axes will, of course, assist in that endeavour, and they are now pushing through the main gate as well. The Minas Morgul Chosen and the Morannon Guard are all spear units, but the sheer amount of Orc forces here, unfortunately the Dwarves have had to spread themselves pretty thin. Maybe. I mean, you can see the 3rd Legion over here just waiting to butcher those Orc Maulers. It's going to be interesting here. I mean, Mordor may very well take a lot of losses going through here, but the Dwarves will also struggle a little bit. Meanwhile, it looks like Mordor are the only ones that are like really making a play to get into the settlement so far, but all the other points are also being menaced. If we go back up to 1 speed, you can see that Rune are now starting to mount a bit of an assault. That is only with clansmen, but it is still going to be pressure applied. And the Southron Warband, they're very, very good, very cost-effective normally because they're AP spears, but the Eastron clansmen are a very cost-effective choice to throw at this unit. I don't know if they'd win, but it would definitely be close. It would definitely prevent Harad from having those cheap AP units. Umbar, despite their lower numbers, are starting to make a bit of a push. We've got the Abrazani Nardu Tariq going up against the Southron Warband. Brave deeds indeed. Actually, the Southron Warband will be very cost effective against the Nardu Tariq. The AP from the Warband standing them in good stead there. They've got more Nardu Tariq, but in general, Umbar's quality should be enough to see them through, provided there aren't reinforcements forthcoming. And it does look as though Harad at this point are actually pulling back a bit. There goes Balin. So Balin was committed. The Dwarf General was in here somewhere, and you can see that the sheer weight of numbers over here. This might be both units even of Minas Morgul Chosen. And this could be where the defenders have to start to think about falling back, and that would explain the shorter battle, because usually the outer phase takes a little bit longer than it may end up doing here, but Mordor have played this really very well. They saw that the dwarves had to defend both gates, but they were also undermanned and under-equipped to deal with a push on one side. And this obviously it's actually a shame that Mordor are one of the, I think they are one of the attacking factions. Without a cavalry unit, if they had the wargs, or even the warlords of Umbar would be ideal, they would be able to cause havoc in the defensive lines at this point. Eastron clansmen marching in, some token forces left behind, but at this point I think the defenders are mostly in full retreat. Certainly in the north, and even over here you can see that they are now setting up a secondary defensive line within the city. So they are essentially abandoning most of the easternmost defences in the city, and they're going to just sort of try and hold the west, which is fine because that means they'll only have to hold 2 outer gates and then hold the streets. Perhaps we'll see. It's still going to be a challenge for the dwarves on the other side. Harad maybe should have sent a little bit more help over there, because it's looking pretty grim so far. What's happening here? Any rearguard action going on? Well, there is, but the Southron Warband are getting shot in the back by Abrazanim, although to be fair to this unit of Southrons, they did a really good job against these Abrazanim. The Abrazanim Nadu Tariq are really very, very good at dealing with heavily armoured infantry, but against these lightly armoured AP spears, they didn't really do all that well. Meanwhile, Isengard are also going to be able to get some of their forces within the city thanks to this gate over here being abandoned. What's going on over here? There is still fighting going on over here by the looks of things. Harland and infantry, only 31 of them, but even so, they are only going up against Dunland clansmen, which, Dunland clansmen, needless to say, not really a match for Linden infantry. There aren't many of them though. It is just sort of a case at this point of they do need to hold this gate, otherwise their defence is completely compromised. But Linden should be okay over here. They've got enough units to hold Isengard at bay for a good long time, and I think Isengard are just content to leave a token force over here and instead commit the bulk of their might over to try and assist Umbar to smash through this new defensive line over here, because Umbar will need some support in terms of numbers. Umbar did bring the smallest army of all the attackers, and this is not a weak defence. Linden have got pikes and they've got javelins. Harad have got the AP polearms, as well as some nasty infantry in the shape of the Trollmen and the dismounted Serpent Guard with that upgrade. Meanwhile, you can see in the city itself there's all sorts of chaos going on as Mordor, their good players being capitalised on, because it looks as though Rune are sending their Eastron crossbowmen in. That's a very strange choice. At this point I would say the dwarves would actually be best served pulling back to the town centre, because this side of the field is going to be a lot harder to hold by themselves, especially considering that Mordor was able to sweep aside their initial defence so quickly. This will mean that the dwarves will still have to face most of Rune and Mordor's forces, I think, but the choke point of the bridge leading into the town centre is something they're going to have to use. Both Mordor and Rune should be able to offset one another very well. These warriors of Khazad-dûm and sentries being used as a rear guard. You only really needed to use 1 unit over here, I think, as opposed to 2. But hey, I mean, it's still giving the Orc Hunters in particular room to retreat, and those archers could well prove to be extremely useful as the battle goes on, as Mordor continues to file into the settlement. Meanwhile, over here we can see that the initial engagements over here may very well be starting, and we've seen Linden and Harad fight one another recently. How will they do when they combine their forces, I wonder? Obviously Dunland clansmen not the biggest threat, and that's why I'm actually quite surprised. Well, actually it's only Haradrim archers, to be fair, and it's a very depleted unit of Haradrim archers at that, but I'm still surprised that they're using ammunition on this unit down here at all. Dunland clansmen are really no threat to any of these units in melee. Harad and Linden would definitely have the beating of them. Abrazanim Nadubai, we're presumably going to try and get into position to sort of shave off some of the numbers from a lot of these polearms, although the Serpent Guard should be sufficient to protect a lot of the Linden pikes, and the Abrazanim have been firing pretty consistently over the course of the battle, so we'll see how much ammunition they actually have left. This is a significant defensive line, but there is also very little in terms of reserves that can readily reinforce them, because if we look back over here, of course, Linden and Harad's forces are needed over here to hold this gate, which actually Isengard are making mounting a bit of an assault on. You can see that those Mithlond Marines throwing their javelins in, and the Uruk-hai Raiders will not make any headway. So more manpower being bled from Isengard here. I'm really glad we got to see the Black Powder Cart in action though. Isengard in general, with their unique ballista and their Black Powder Cart, have got some neat options for a siege, and I'm glad we got to see the less popular version for once. Those trolls are menacing in the background as well. Trolls in general can be really useful against the elves because they can inflict terrible casualties on them. Archers trying their best to shoot into the lightly armoured Linden forces, which obviously is the right thing to do. The Highland infantry, there simply isn't enough of them to deal with this many clansmen. Dunlanding variety. What's going on up here? You can see there is a fight going on, and it is between Flagrim and Orc Hunters. So these Orc Hunters almost definitely were caught out by the advancing runic forces, and the Orc Hunters are decent, but they're going to be no match for a unit of decently expensive dedicated line infantry, especially the Flagrim. Flagrim definitely the workhorses of the runic army. Very reliable in most situations, only really against the elves you want to be careful about bringing them, and even then useful against Imladris as Mordor continues to just flow through the streets. This is going to be an intimidating force to try and deal with. I think Rune and Mordor together at this point have got momentum on their side, and if they can carry that on, they can potentially crush the dwarves and render the defence in the south somewhat irrelevant, because they could take the town centre, and that is a way to win. Dunlanding clansmen on the front line, there's a lot of force over there. Rune also may very well reinforce the south by the looks of things. They've got some infantry hovering on the periphery of this fight, as well as some clansmen, a lot of infantry actually. Interesting. Meanwhile, this is a very clustered archer force. Narrim, Veriag mercenaries, and Abrazani Nadubawib. So that's a lot of arrows just being sent into the defensive positions. I wonder what they're targeting. Various things by the looks of it, but Hashari Stalkers. So that is body piercing. I mean, they can scarcely miss. There's arrows just flying back and forth over here. Buhard Beast Hunters, not a bad target. They will go down under sustained arrow fire. Harlington Guard also firing, but Elven Archers as well as the Haradrim Rangers are going to make this difficult, but it is worthwhile as well because it is forcing them to use their ammunition, and in turn that will mean when the attacking infantry blobs up along this front line, the body-piercing projectiles will cease to be as much of a problem. Meanwhile, as we go under the map for a little while, you can see Isengard are keeping their assault up over here, which is commendable. More Uruk-hai Raiders as well as... Nope, it's just Uruk-hai Raiders, so a fresh unit of them was sent forward. At least I think. Yes. Muhard Berserkers, Harland Infantry, and Mithlond Pikemen holding the front line, so naturally the Uruk-hai Raiders will not be able to make very many inroads. But it is still forcing Linden and Harad to commit resources over here, although this is going to sort of necessitate the hastening of... Oof, bloody hell. This is going to necessitate an attack of some sort to happen on this front soon, because if the Isengard forces on the south gate fall apart, that's going to be a lot of reserves that are freed up from Linden and Harad that can then either come over here to prevent this advance or go back to the town centre in order to assist the dwarves, which the dwarves do look as though they have indeed retreated to the town centre, which is definitely the right thing for them to do. Some Linden forces are still over here as well. We've got some Sons of the Fallen, some hammers, the Dwarven catapult getting ready to fire, but Mordor is not slowing down. I have to say I'm impressed so far with how Mordor have handled this. Definitely piling the pressure on the defenders by just advancing and keeping up the attack, but this could be where that comes back to bite him, because this is going to be a huge amount of potential damage that this Dwarven catapult could do. We shall see. If you hear any noises in the background, I apologise. The dog is in close proximity. Meanwhile, Isengard over here having a little bit less of a good time. The Dunlanding clansmen are over here. Obviously the dismounted Serpent Guard have been committed forward, and now you would have to imagine the Dunlanding clansmen will cease to punch above their weight. Amusingly, these Uruk-hai Raiders have actually done pretty well for themselves. I would imagine that comes against the Muhard Berserkers more so than the Linden Pikes. Let's go and have a look over here. This is an interesting defence the defenders have set up. Usually, the way this battle works out is once the outer defence is gone, the defenders will panic retreat right the way back to the town centre and become really bottled up. I'm actually glad the defenders have tried to hold the sort of interior of the city, because it's not something I've seen so far. Something we still haven't seen actually is the defenders or the attackers utilise the dock area down here, because there's really no need to go down there for either one of them, but maybe if there was a hidden unit down there, waiting in the wings from the defenders to ambush. The trollmen are going to be a pretty intimidating force to try and deal with. On the front line in general, I mean, the attackers are still trying to sort of chip away at the manpower of this front line, do damage where they can. Uruk-hai raiders, where are they? Well, there's Uruk-hai archers over there as well. A lot of archers in general have been firing for quite some time. Southron archers actually breaking ranks and charging forward. Obviously archers that are out of ammunition can be used as disposable units fairly readily. This is happening on both counts. The Abrazani Nadubawi were going to be used in such a way. I just had a crash. It's actually been a little while since I had a crash halfway through a battle. Usually it has the good grace to be at the start.
The enemy is no longer in command of the city.
But yes, Abrazani Nadubawi are indeed routing. And, you know, that's a rare enough sight. I mean, Umbar's forces usually have pretty good morale, all things considered. But now it looks like we are going to have a genuine assault. And for the person who, in the last video, was sort of asking me to get a little bit closer, in large-scale battles like this, that is the problem. You know, it will crash, because the game is now basically creaking at the seams. It's on the very edge of what it is capable of doing. Especially on a map as big as this, with all the varied units like this. Medieval 2 is an old game, and it's starting to really feel the strain of some of the things that the Reforged team are adding to it, so definitely pushing the limits of what is possible with the tools they are given. But here you can see that there is a genuine assault going on. There's some Scion Rim on the front line as well, trying to get through, but I would imagine that this front line is going to be relatively okay for the time being, until, you know, some more heavy-duty units perhaps are sent forward. The catapult is obviously doing pretty decent damage. Stuff like the Castamir's Legion could be very well called for. Even crossbows of some description would be ideal for trying to break them down. 2 good hits there, right into the middle of the defensive line. Very nice indeed. Meanwhile, we can see that Mordor definitely making a big play. The catapult is still firing, and you can see actually that Mordor starting to pay the price a little bit perhaps for some of their extremely aggressive play, because a lot of their units are now routing. There is a limit to how far you can push things as Mordor in this fashion, especially when hits like that are occurring. Broken and fighting to death. The Black Legion of Barad-dûr. So for everyone who says how overpowered they are here, they flew far, far too close to the sun. Bit of Icarus syndrome here. They saw glory and victory in their sights. They thought they could take the town centre with a big push, just like they did at the outer gates, but here the dwarves were ready for it, and the catapult here has proven to be absolutely key, because it's not often you see Black Legion and Minas Morgul chosen routing either, so we've seen a lot of high morale units routing. Noldorin Guard, we've also got the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers here. Their axe throwers obviously doing huge damage to this initial assault, and ultimately I think Mordor and Rune will have to wait to attack this area, because they've taken such huge losses. The Mithril Guard are on the front line. The Sons of the Fallen, there's guards of Khazad-dûm here. They're not going to be able to make it through, even with the Orc Javelins. They're going to need to send forward their entire force if they're going to make it through, and even then I'm not sure whether they'd manage it. I mean, the Dwarf Catapult has been so lethal. Meanwhile, another area which was going pretty well for the defenders. You can see that the Uruk-hai Berserkers have come forward. MITHLOND Marines, which actually do form as, well, they hybridize as line infantry as well as being javelins, but the Uruk-hai Berserkers with their multiple HP and their huge attack values doing very well for themselves. And actually we missed the deployment of the Trolls of the White Hand as we move over here, and some of the Trolls are actually already dead. But this is bad for the defenders. They need reinforcements down here. The upgraded Uruk-hai Infantry, the Trolls, the Uruk-hai Berserkers. There's also now Snaga Skirmishers getting up onto the walls to help finish off what remains of the defensive line. Isengard are going to break through over here unless there are reinforcements forthcoming. And can the defenders afford to send reinforcements? I don't know if they can. It looks as though what they plan to do is fall back to the town centre, so while they may have put up a fight initially over here, I think what they're going to do is ultimately leave this front line over here to try and kill as many as they can, and then fall back to the relative safety of the town centre. And you can see right along the front line we've got Uruk-hai Infantry, upgraded variant of course, the Scion Rim, the Uruk-hai Raiders, huge amounts of Flag Rim on the front line. The balance of forces is evenly matched, but the numbers advantage is definitely for the attackers here, so as soon as the pikes start to lose a lot of their manpower, you would imagine that this fight is going to swing pretty heftily in favour of the attackers. We've got some Variag mercenaries and some Narim. Where are they going? They are going down here. They are going to go along the docks and presumably try and meet up with the the tattered remnants of the Mordor and Runic forces that tried to advance over the bridge, because my word, that Dwarven catapult sent them packing very, very quickly. 2 units of Abrazani Narduzagar now moving forward. Obviously Swordmaster unit, skillful. Remains to be seen whether or not these Warlords of Umbar will come into play. Obviously as soon as this line breaks they can get in behind and start doing some nice hammer and anvil. We've actually got some Eastron clansmen, and actually Rune had already used this area, so they had used the docks to circumvent this this defensive position, and the Warlords I think now are going to follow suit, which is good to see. It's good to see the docks come into play. When I go back and get a screenshot of this, I might do the Warlords sort of galloping through the docks, we'll see. But obviously the first unit that came over here to take advantage of that was only Eastron clansmen, to be fair. But even so, they're still going to be able to defeat Southron archers in melee. Very limited issues. But I would say that this line is now living on borrowed time at this point. The Flagrim is starting to push through the gaps here. You can see the Uruk-hai infantry already getting through. The Southron pikemen starting to waver. Narduzagar also being sent forth.
The enemy has killed the leader of our allies. Avenge him.
Yeah, and there goes the Nazgul. The Warg Riders are in. They're going to be charging forth as well as the Warlords obviously. So now the cavalry will be able to come into its own. We'll be able to do some nice hammer and anvil. Try and deal with this defensive line as efficiently as they possibly can, because from here on out, we are now past the halfway point naturally. It will be a fight for the town centre, but I'm at least glad we got to see the streets in action, the attackers making good use of the various routes through the city. And here come the Warlords. They need to be careful though, because the Forlinden pikemen are right here, and this could be a good catch for the Forlinden pikemen, seeing as they are now basically doomed. And the Warlords I think realise that, and they do get out of there before any of them die. But even so, the fact that they had to reposition those pikes made the front line fall all the more quickly. The Warlords with a very tame charge, although it is causing these Forlinden pikes to waver. Let's go and see what's happening over here on the bridge, shall we? Because those Nazgul are still fighting. It goes to show how strong the Nazgul really are. Can you see how many of them there are left? No? Well, regardless, the Nazgul stayed behind in that mess, and it's one of the ways you can deal with the Nazgul, by isolating them from their allies and then trying to bring them down. And there are 6 of them, and that does of course point to the fact that their hit points have almost certainly been expended. We'll see if Mordor still has his other unit. Eastron crossbows, Gamprim. It started so well for Mordor, and now it has turned so sour. I don't think he's got really anything left. Did he commit forward everything? That's amazing. All of his units are routing.
Our cursed enemy is in control of the city.
That would be amazing if he lost almost all of his forces. I think he has. I think that Nazgul on the bridge is really all he has left. So Mordor's army has actually been destroyed. So initially his aggression served him really well. But as he tried to follow through on that and try to take the town centre, it went horribly wrong for him. Meanwhile, what's going on over here? Dunland clansmen, Uruk-hai berserkers, presumably trying to cut off the retreat of any units trying to get to the town centre. Uruk-hai archers getting up on the hill, though they're not really needed over there anymore. The front line has fallen, and all they're doing is mopping up routing units, which of course means some more Uruk-hai infantry there, but of course that means that the only thing left is the town centre, this little island that the Elven Palace sits upon. If we have a look at the percentage of kills, we can see that the attackers are ahead, which maybe is a grim sign for the defenders, but the defenders have managed to save a lot of their good stuff for the end. And let's not forget, of course, that they do have the terrible power of the Dwarven catapult over here, which has already seen the end of basically Mordor's entire army. So they do have to be very, very careful about that. It's going to be tricky. You would still give the advantage to the attackers, because you know, history has taught us in this sort of situation that the numbers should ultimately be enough to wear down this defensive position. But I don't know. I wouldn't count the defenders out of this one just yet. And Rune are going to have to take over responsibilities for attacking the North Bridge, purely because Mordor's basically got nothing left. They managed to save, I think, some of their Nazgul, but that is about it. Other than that, we've still got some nasty units from Haraz. Well, the Demons of the Desert still alive, which again capable of devastating damage. The Hashari Stalkers as well, the Champions of Nafara. The Noldering Guard, still alive and well. One of them a little bit more... One of them a little bit damaged, but that's not the end of the world. Linden are looking the most damaged of all of these forces, I must say. Interesting. It's going to be a perilous assault for the attackers, but based on the amount of frames left, I don't think they're going to waste too much in the way of time. I think they're just going to go straight in, which is risky, but it obviously carries certain rewards. They've still got their Nazkai. Obviously, the attackers have still got some strong units of their own. Rune still got their Carmen's Chosen. Umbar have still got their Naruna Iron Royal Guard. Obviously, Isengard with their Nazkai. But the quality fight, you would have to say, rests squarely in favour of the defenders at this point. Which is why I'm saying that the percentages, even though they're 10% behind and traditionally the attackers make it up in the late game, I think that might be the other way round this time, at least to an extent. I don't know if it will be enough to make the defenders win, per se, but definitely give the attackers pause. What's going on this bridge? There's some defensive positions. There's Uruk-hai Raiders who are fighting something. Some Harlanded infantrymen who are fighting to the death. And obviously fighting to the death means that they will essentially die whenever they are hit. And there they go. Finished off by the Uruk-hai Raiders with the white hands on their shields. I mean, that doesn't make sense. You're the attackers. But you do you, announcer man. You do you. And it does look as though the south is going to be the area for the vast majority of the attack. Rune are sending some of their forces down here, so their entire army is not even going to attack from the north, which naturally means that the Dwarven Catapult has got a very clear choice of which road to cover. You see the Muhan Berserkers on the front line. They won't necessarily have the most staying power, but their AP could be useful, particularly if Umbar or Isengard lead the way. They've got some polearms still, the Forlinden Pikemen. Trollmen of Harad still on the front line, definitely not the sort of unit that you want to be seeing as you go up against them. Khazad Reclaimers, there's a lot of quality here for the defenders. I'm not sure if the attackers have got what it takes. They've got Warlords, of course, but the Warlords of Umbar are going to be extremely difficult to use in this situation. A lot of these units have got anti-cavalry capabilities, or at least are capable of dishing out range damage that will give the Warlords pause. The Wargs are moving forward. No, those aren't Wargs, sorry. Uruk-hai Raiders. And they're routing already. They took one look at this this defensive position and were like, you know what? No. We're going to run away. We're going to go home to Orthanc. These Dunlending clansmen being wasted, essentially. At this point, the attackers can't really afford to waste much in terms of manpower with this mammoth of a defence lying before them, but the Forlinden Archers will be able to finish them off. Some nice ranged fire going on, though. The Uruk-hai Archers getting into a decent position. They're going to have to use their skirmishers pretty wisely here, the attackers, or at least what they've got left in terms of skirmish firepower. Forlinden Archers with their job done, the Dunlending clansmen broken and fighting to the death, they are going to retreat, depriving the attackers of a little bit more of their manpower. But we are now just a little bit before the final 10,000 frames, the business end of the battle, and what will be the fate of the Grey Havens. Will the forces of evil prevail? Or will the redeemed Haradrim assist the elves and dwarves in the defence of the great city? I personally am not sure. I do not know. I would not like to throw my hat into either ring at this point in time. 9% difference, but the quality advantage squarely in favour of the defenders, the number advantage hugely in favour of the attackers, but do they have the quality units left to mount assault? Because that Mordor assault was disastrous, it must be said. Mordor's army completely smashed. Goes to show how powerful the Dwarven Catapult can be, which already is readying itself to rain down more pain upon the attacking ranks. Doubtless they're going to be going for the back ranks. Indeed they are. Only a grazing hit there, but even so, it's a very intimidating sight. The Abrazani Nadu Tariq on the front, some Nadu Bawib, some clansmen. In the same token goes for the defenders. They need to use their skirmish power very wisely. The catapult in particular, don't know how much ammunition it has left, but it's going to need to utilise all of that power to its advantage. The Nardu Tariq are going to charge in, but they're going to have a very torrid time of it. You can actually see that the catapult crew they're trying to skirmish down the catapult crew with their archers, but I'm not sure whether they're going to have the ammunition to actually kill all of them, or at least to the extent that it makes the catapult unusable. The Nardu Tariq and the Nardu Bar, we're going to struggle here because the addition of these Muhad Berserkers on the front line, obviously with their AP and the Trollmen in particular, they're just going to stop this assault in its tracks. Good hits there on the back ranks of the attackers. I think it hit mainly the flag rim actually, or the Scion rim, one or the other, because the archers didn't really take the bulk of that hit, only one unit died. Going to be attacking from this side as well. The Nazgul are still alive, so Mordor technically still have some forces that they can commit, and the Nazgul, if you wanted one unit left, even if they are depleted, it would be them, and Rune are going to follow them in with what they can. Most of Rune's forces are now repositioning to the North Bridge, and what they have sent down here is already being committed. And they're going to be aggressive here, the attackers. They're going to throw it all out. While the Hashari Stalkers, using their body-piercing projectiles to try and assist the northern defensive position, which I imagine the north would actually hold. It's the south that I would be more concerned with. Isengard and Umbar down here. We shall see. Flag Rim and Scion Rim moving forward onto the front line. We'll see. This will be a good litmus test, really, of the staying power of the Trollmen. We'll see how well they can do here. Hashari Stalkers still firing. The Nazgul are on the front line, but they are going to be held at bay by this very thick defensive line. Eastron Crossbowmen, now that's a unit which could definitely tilt the battle in favour. That catapult's still firing away on the advancing forces. Uruk-hai crossbows. The crossbows in general at this point, if they can get some nice shots off, the defenders will lose manpower at a rate they can't really afford. Again, more nasty hits, doing more damage to the attackers. Reinforcements on the way forward, some Harland and Guard. What are the crossbows targeting? Oh, they're just going to be indiscriminately targeting the front line. Presumably going after something like the Hashari Stalkers or the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers. That would be the real temptation there. There's still Mithril Guard in there somewhere, and there's still Hammers, there's still Sons of the Fallen. The AP from the Runic forces will certainly help them, but I don't think it will win the fight for them all alone. The Carmel's Chosen will help, so will the Shadow Guard, more mercenaries. I mean, Rune will definitely put pressure on this northern line and make it so that they can't afford to send reinforcements to the south, which the southern line is a little bit more thin on the ground. They've got their Champions of Nafrat, they've got their Noldorin Guard. The Demons of the Desert, I think, are going to have to be committed sooner rather than later if they want to keep their front lines in good enough shape. They need to keep their manpower intact. And Rune, being the ones to move in the vast bulk of their forces, obviously as soon as a gap appears, that would be the moment for the Warlords to make themselves useful. Castamir's Rangers as well, that was a unit we didn't see earlier on from Simply Simple. Body-piercing projectiles for the attackers could be just what the Doctor ordered. Ooh, that's grisly. The Hashari Stalkers with a perfect shot along the line of the Runic forces, which is immediately causing them horrendous casualties. But so far they're only really going up against the Orc Hunters on the front. As soon as they get into the Hammers and the Mithril Guard and the Sons of the Fallen, that will be when things start to go a little bit wrong for them, I think. Some Eastron Clansmen moving forward, so some more reinforcements, more manpower just being sent in. Rune need their front line over here to hold, otherwise all of the defenders are going to be able to focus all of their efforts on this one front line, which the defenders might need to do, honestly, because as time goes on, the attackers are starting to wear this front line down. See over here the Hashari Stalkers. I'm loath to get too close in case it crashes again at this late stage of the battle. Uruk-hai crossbows out of ammunition, just being committed forward now. More and more cannon fodder just for the meat grinder at this point. Naruna Aru Royal Guard, good at melee as well, multiple HP. They may only be spears and suffer the malice, but they're tough to kill. So are the Carmel's Chosen for most units, but the Mithril Guard should be able to manage it. More clansmen, so many arrows still flying backwards and forwards, which is surprising. I mean, usually a siege is quite protracted, and that of course means that most ammunition is used in the earlier stages of the battle, and it becomes a real slogfest in the late game. But here, both attackers and defenders of varying armies have saved a lot of their ranged firepower for the end, although to be fair, the battle has moved at a quicker pace than most of these longer siege battles tend to move at. Those Khazad-dûm Reclaimers throwing their axe into the side of this runic assault, which is starting to run out of steam. They've got Balchor, Sapphire Bladesman and Shadow Guard back there. They're going to have to think about committing everything, because they need to keep up the pressure on both flanks. If they allow the defenders to focus only on one choke point, I think the defenders will probably be fine. You can see the Hashari Stalkers have traded over to this side of the battlefield now, and they will start to use their body-piercing projectiles. But now the Snaga doing a good job at sending them packing. Snaga skirmishers coming in clutch there. They're trying to hit the trolls, but the trolls, despite being big individually, are a small target of a unit, and particularly for a catapult, the Dwarven catapult is more inaccurate and more wild. Difficult to hit them. Uruk-hai infantry also moving forward. What's going on over here? You can see that the Hashari Stalkers now being committed to melee. Rangers have got decent melee skill, of course, but only 19 of them won't make a huge difference when it comes to the frontline fight. And in general, I think over here, the defenders should be okay for the time being. The guards of Khazad-dûm and the Mithril Guard on the front line in particular are going to be real difficult for the attackers to punch their way through. Maybe numbers will win out in the end over here. We'll see. Rune did bring a lot of AP to bear, which will certainly help things. But I still think that the attacker's best bet is going to be here in the south. The Trolls of the White Hand. Definitely going to be dishing out that damage, particularly to pikes. Trolls in general can do really well against pikes because they buckle that phalanx formation that they have. Snaga might be out of ammunition. If they are, they won't offer too much in terms of melee, other than just more warm bodies for the front line. What's going on in the background there? Castamir's Legion still yet to be committed forward. You can see all of the blue on the map waiting. Definitely a lot of reserves in the south. And now the Balchor Sapphire Bladesmen are reloading. What are they going after, I wonder? Is it going to be the men on the front, or are they going to try and deal with the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers? I think it is the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers they're trying to kill, but actually I think the defenders will accept that. The Reclaimers have already done a lot of damage. And now the Champions of Neferat being committed to the front line. Another high damage unit which should be able to shore up this front line. There's another unit coming in, another unit of Variag mercenaries. So Rune just committing forward whatever they have to the front line to try and keep this front line going. And it's even over here, which is the amazing thing. The Eastron clansmen actually slowly but surely... I mean, the quality of these units over here should still be enough to pull the defenders out of this hole they have themselves in. But they won't have really anything left over at the end to show for it. And they're going to need reinforcements down in the south, I think. See that it is now 11% in favour of the attackers. This, though, we've seen how deadly they can be in the past. The catapult is going to need to try and get some point-blank hits. They did against Mordor, and at this point in time they're going to need to do so again. Demons of the Desert actually going to move over to the other front line. Point-blank hits are what's needed. You can't afford to try and attack them as they come forward. You need to get a mass rout at this point in order to try and hold this this south bridge. Go on, catapult, you can do it. Fire. You need to fire quickly before you get skirmished out. Oh no. The clutch troll pushing their way through the lines. They took too long. And now the catapult crew being battered by this one troll of the White Hand which survived passage through the front line. And that could be it, because without that catapult the south road is probably going to fall. The catapult crew is going to be just hounded by this troll. Meanwhile, Demons of the Desert are in position. Balchor Sapphire Bladesman. Clash of the Titans of the Javelin world, it must be said. We're getting into really the final death throes of this fight, and I have to say, unless the defenders manage to get some form of dreadful chain route, I should say, probably going to go in favour here of the attackers. Now we've got a unit of 113 Uruk-hai infantry with that armour upgrade, moving forward more and more, just hammering away on this front line. The catapult's back, only 5 of them though. It will not take much in terms of skirmish power at this point to bring them down. Ooh, there goes the Runic General. That sort of morale shock is exactly the sort of thing No, wrong target, wrong target. You need to go for this. You need to go for this close force over here. Rout them off. A Rune looking like routing? Not really. They've got units of high enough tier on the front line that they're not going to be forced into a rout from the loss of the general. Trying to go for those Numenorian shield guard, getting a good hit on them, to be fair. Ooh, mistake there. Demons of the Desert. At this point, this front line is looking rickety, and now the hammer is about to be brought down. I think the Umbar elites, or at least the higher tier Umbar forces, are now moving forward, and I don't think this defensive line is going to be able to hold itself together. Looks as though the attackers are going to be victorious this day on the Grey Havens. There are the Balshal Sapphire Bladesmen committing themselves to melee. They're not half bad in melee. Over here, a very even fight between Rune and the defending forces. The Demons of the Desert are going to be able to fire their missiles. They need to at this point. They need to do something. There they go. They're just sort of throwing it into this really long attacking line here. Castamir's Legion now moving forward. They've still got some Uruk-hai infantry in reserve should they need it. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the defenders are about to be overwhelmed with not a lot of time left to turn it around. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, I suppose. I guess I've seen stranger things, but it's unlikely, shall we say. Morale shocks are going to be really difficult to inflict on Umbar forces like this as well. Castamir's Legion don't rout for just anything. To be fair, it was the chain route the chain route that we inferred earlier from Mordor. That is Mordor, to be fair. They did bring a lot of low tier units so that they could afford 2 units of Nazgul, 2 Minas Morgul Chosen, and those Black Legion, as well as the Olag-hai. The Olag-hai, interestingly enough, I don't know what they did. They vanished into the ether. I assume they just got hit by the catapult repeatedly. But I mean, Mordor were very impressively dispatched for the defenders, and it's good that they were, because if they weren't, this would have been exceedingly one-sided. But ultimately, the Dwarven catapult was not able to carry the day as much as was required. The Demons of the Desert doing their best to do damage, but at this point, there simply isn't enough manpower on the front line, and Umbar, I think they smell blood because they are going to try and push their way through, I think, at this point. Although with Rangers, maybe not the best idea. One of the lightweight units of the Reforged world. Mithlond Marines pulling back from the front line. Slowly but surely over here, the champions of Nafarat. Well, I think the Balshal Sapphire Bladesmen are actually making it a little bit more difficult. But with these Mithlond Marines now, they're trying to go to the other side of the battlefield, try and shore it up as much as they possibly can. Here we go, though. This could be the end of days if the Warlords of Umbar can force their way through. I mean, there are still pikes on the front line, so it's not a given that the Warlords will get through here. And even if they do, the Demons of the Desert are, I believe, 2-handed spears in melee, so it will be a really... it will be surprising, I think, that his knights would fall so quickly to demons in melee, if Simply Simple is not aware of that. Although he's played pretty well, so I assume that he's not a new player, despite the fact that I haven't actually seen him in any one of my replays before. The Warlords pushing their way through, making a nuisance of themselves, making the defensive lines plummet into chaos as we are now within the final 1,000 frames. Champions of Nafarat, victory seems certain over on that front, but I don't think it's going to matter. Here we can see the... that would be the Elven General, I believe, and now, finally, the final wave is essentially coming forward. The Uruk-hai Berserkers and the Nazgul and Uruk-hai Infantry. That will be the final nail in the defender's coffin. The champions of Nafarat did pretty well over on the other front, to be fair. If things had carried on over here, the defenders would have won this bridge, but the champions of Nafarat are not going to be enough to reverse the defenders' fortunes here, I fear. So once again, the Grey Havens is going to be burnt to the ground. I don't think I've shown a battle on the Grey Havens where the defenders have won. Interestingly enough, I think the attackers have won every time, which I'm sure people will be exceedingly unhappy about. Demons of the Desert being accosted by those warlords, which, you know, paid a bit of a price for trying to get through that front line. There goes the Harad general. Yeah, they should probably fear you at this point, to be fair. Let's have a look at the sort of the final, and to be fair, I mean, that's closer than perhaps you would imagine. There isn't many of the attackers left. You know, that northern assault was going well for a time, but then the runic forces started to fall apart.
Fate has smiled upon us and snatched us a victory, no matter how small.
Yeah, there we go. That is the win. The admit defeats come, and the defenders were not a million miles away there. I mean, I'd suggest even that if the initial dwarven defense didn't get so thoroughly crushed, and if they didn't lose some of their key units on the outer walls, they would have had enough to potentially win this. I mean, only 5% difference, mass routes everywhere. The attackers started to run out of manpower towards the end. I mean, the only genuinely scary unit they had towards the end, in this sort of situation anyway, the warlords, a little bit more difficult to use traditionally here, would be the Nazkai. So, interesting indeed. Let's have a look at the kills that Rune got. 101 on Scion Rim, which is not bad for a unit of spears in this sort of situation. The Carmel's chosen, obviously not great because they were sent into a really rough front line for them. The Flag Rim, honestly, one unit doing okay, but the others, I mean, their kills are spread out, should we say. The crossbow's doing okay. All of the kills were spread pretty thinly across the army. Isengard getting the most kills. That's not too surprising from an attacking point of view. Their gate went pretty well for them once they started to genuinely push on it in the south, and obviously they were helping the assault elsewhere. They had an army into the late game as well, which of course Mordor did not have. They had a fantastic start to the game and then completely fell apart. Interesting enough. Defenders, Harad doing well. Khazad-dûm, very similar. Linden getting significantly less kills, and I wonder why that is. Linden traditionally do so well in a situation like this. Maybe it was their composition. They didn't really have... They didn't have their Nolder and Blade Masters. That wouldn't have made 1,000 kills worth of difference. I don't know. I suppose it's just a matter of composition. There was a lot of pikes. Pikes traditionally do their killing quite slowly. And in this situation, mass would have been more helpful. I think more Harland and infantry certainly wouldn't have hurt Linden instead of getting so many pikemen. But still, they had some MITHLOND Marines and they work as pretty good line infantry regardless. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this Greyhaven siege, the attackers winning. The next large set piece that I do will either be a scenario that I was sent, or potentially Thranduil's Halls. We'll see how I feel at the time. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.